What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Tracey, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up? Welcome to this special episode of Coffee and Grit. And so, you know what? I'm a big believer, as you all may know, that everything happens for a reason. And I had a last minute cancellation and tried to fill it with a couple last minute guests. But yeah, I had a couple people pop in mind. But you know what? It's really hard, obviously, to schedule last minute. And so I said, you know what? I've got this subject and these stories that are on my mind, and you know, it's a good time. Let's utilize the time, go in the studio. And so, just starting off, and Cameron was just asking me some really good questions as we were setting up everything, and he was asking me, you know, how long I work with clients and whatnot. And it really started off because over the weekend, me and my wife had rearranged our room, and I may have shared in past episodes that like that change it energizes me. I love when like things get moved around and there's like new scenery. It's something that just energizes me. And so I'm big in self-awareness, and that's going to be one of the topics that we're talking about today is being really self-aware in discovering your superpowers, discovering what energizes you. A big reason for this topic is this morning at boot camp. People were talking about some of their struggles and the things that have been kind of like reoccurring, and you know, the things they were going to do to make it better. And I started asking questions more or less to understand their strengths and their superpowers, and you know, because it doesn't have to, you know, if you're self-aware, again, what energizes you, when are you at your best? And I know that if I want a shot of energy, if I want some of that, if I want to get going, that if we rearrange a room, that just is kind of like the little things. It's the little things in life that can make a huge difference sometimes. And so, in fact, in boot camp, somebody was talking about their ideal is like if they get it when they're at their best, when they're getting up at 5 a.m. They know this, like they get up, they journal, they do some meditation, they get their workout in, so knowing that, she knows that's when she is at her best energy. But then sometimes life gets in the way, right? And we stop doing those things. And so it's always good. Like I said, on that journey of self-awareness, I had a mentor once that said, I was having a great month, and I was super excited. It was a great sales month, and it was my best one ever. And I was kind of raving about it to him. And he said, "That's great." He's like, "What are you doing?" He was like, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "What have you been doing differently? Like, what are, you know, jot those things down, like become self-aware, like understand what it is that you're doing, and journal them, write them down, because, you know, believe it or not, right now you're on top of the world, but there is going to be another decline. There is going to be a time where you're going to struggle. It's hard to believe right now. But when you get in that dip, when you get in that rut, you can come back to where you were at in your mindset, where you're at in your thought process, the things that you were doing, how you were thinking, the level of clarity that you had back when everything was just really clicking." And so that's really genius. And that's, again, if you're journaling, going through that self-discovery, when are you at your best? You know, take some moments, like pause this right now and really think about it. For me, for example, I know I'm at my best when I'm getting out and I'm working out. You know, when I work out in the morning, when I'm reading regularly. So when I'm reading books, when I'm listening to audibles, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm doing my personal development. I have my personal development time. When I get out and I have my recreation time, you know, whether it's golf or basketball or just kind of that time for myself, you know, that clarity, getting up early in the morning. So just listing off some of the things that you know, I know when I do these things, I can give myself extra energy, because hey, that's what we need in life, especially as entrepreneurs. You know, we need to stack the cards in our deck, because it's not always going our way, right? And so what extra boosts and what extra ways can we take control of to give us that energy? And so all that to say, we started talking about how I like change. And so Cameron had asked me how long I work with clients. And this is a really good segue. I told him he'd have to listen to the episode to understand, to get a good picture. And so when I started my business, and it's about 7.5 years ago, or a little over 7 years ago now, I started my business, and I started off as a, I didn't realize what the term was then, but for better terminology now is fractional sales leadership. I would go in and I looked at myself as a consultant where I would work with small businesses and help them develop their sales teams, develop their processes, do that training. What I recognized as I had developed in, my sales leadership career is that so many people start a business because they have a purpose, a passion, an expertise, or they want to work for themselves, and they have a lot of misguided thoughts around what it was, what the level of effort that you have to put in order to grow that business, or what it takes from a sales and marketing standpoint to grow that business. And because I saw that, and I saw that sales was so easy, we make it so hard. Same thing with leadership. I have a mindset around this is so easy, but we're making it so hard. I saw an opportunity to go out there and help these small businesses like plug in because they're not giving the time that their sales teams needed in order to develop them. And that's what I had success in my career. I saw that that's where, I was in the sales leadership role. And so I saw I'm going to go and impact several companies. And this worked for several years because I was able to help a lot of companies. I was able to help develop their sales teams and create processes and do these things. And it fell into my strengths. And the nice thing about these types of clients were they were bigger dollar points, like for example, like $5,000 a month, and and then it was a longer agreement. It wasn't like a month by month case where I really found a lot of passion and excitement as I work with entrepreneurs that were just making a difference, some kind of a difference in the world. I was doing one-on-one coaching with a lot of like startups, a lot of like visionaries that are like trying to get started and they don't necessarily have a ton of money, or maybe they've been doing their business for a while and they've been really struggling with their confidence and how to share their story and how to market themselves. And then once they market themselves, how do they then sell without feeling slimy? Because these are heart-centered people that are just want to make a difference in the world. So a lot of times they're giving away their stuff for free, right? I was getting lit up with those people, but they didn't necessarily have a ton of money to pay me. And so I had this limiting mindset around I have to serve these types of clients because this will keep my lights on, it'll pay my bills, it'll keep my company succeeding. Well, I can then go find my passion projects that help me stay excited for my business. And this worked out really, really well. I grew my business and I found difference-making clients along the way. And there'll be a piece where I go into really diving into self-awareness soon, and understanding there's so many things as entrepreneurs that we're good at. What is it? What is that? What are those unique differences? What is that thing about you that is your absolute superpower and the thing that really, really lights you up? And who are the actual people that like really, really light you up? Cameron asked a good question. How long will you work with clients? And I've had clients that I've worked with for 4 or 5 years. And he was like, when are you done with the clients? And it's like, when they don't excite me anymore. And from a standpoint of like, it's from a selfish standpoint, I've had a client that I've worked with for over 4 years named Sparkle Lindsay, and she's an absolute difference maker. She lights me up because she's constantly growing, evolving, and she's changing the world. And as we continue to work together, there's a constant new sight, a new story, there's change. Again, it's empowering me. I call it empowering the empowerers. Those are my people, the difference makers, the people that are out there making differences. I feel like if I can empower those empowerers to really understand who they are and the purpose that they were meant to make in this world, that I can in turn empower millions of people, that I can touch millions of lives. And how freaking amazing is that, right? And so those are the people that were really lighting me up. But I have this limiting belief that I've got to stay over here and make all this money and then have these passion projects. Well, the problem with that is I had, like I said, some difference-making clients that really lit me up for certain reasons and that I'll get into in a minute. But I had so many other clients that were just constantly draining energy. And so a couple years ago, I had my absolute best year in business, had a lot of success, was like super excited as far as the money that I was making and the stability and comfort that I felt. However, I was getting bogged down and my energy was being pulled down. And it was to the point where I had operated my business to that point where I was just constantly moving and growing and building this business, and where I hadn't taken a vacation and I didn't feel like I needed a vacation. And I had worked a way up to where I had literally burnt myself out, and I was so excited to take a vacation. We took a 2-week cruise, me and my family, which was amazing and awesome and a great break. But when I got back, I wasn't any more excited or energetic or energized to go and serve those types of clients. And so with this limiting belief I had that I had to stay over here and try to get these clients, I'm getting clients that aren't lighting me up. And in the meantime, I'm not like doing an incredible job for those clients. And so this last year was just an absolute struggle. It was my worst year in business. And what's so crazy about that is like I'm going out and I've got this podcast going, and people see me on the streets of like this. There's all this stuff that's like that's happening that looks awesome, and I'm absolutely struggling because I really don't want this type of client anymore. I don't necessarily know what to ask for. I'm stuck in this limiting belief that I've got to have this type of client in order to continue going or building my business. And I'm really stuck at what is it that I'm doing? Like, what is it that I'm doing with like the sparkles and the clients that are lighting me up that allow me to really fine tune and grow that business and get excited about it. And in the meantime, what is it that I'm doing in this podcast that is, getting the attention that it's getting, and driving the traffic, and, getting people excited about the gas, or like having people, strangers come up to me and tell me about these natural gifts and abilities that I have to interview people. What is it that is happening, and how can I merge those things? Because forever the podcast was all about marketing and, and also serving others and getting their story out, and also, marketing for my business and who I am and branding for me and creating content for those purposes. But it was never, it was never its own business. And I guess I always operated these two things, and like I'm doing this superpower thing over here, and then I'm coaching over here and consulting here. And I'm a big believer, you'll hear this over and over again, I've heard it in so many just even recent episodes of, I'm a big believer that when you go out and you make so much impact in the world, that the results, they will come. And so what has been the hardest over this last year is I'm struggling to, is I'm having a tough year from my business standpoint, is that I'm going out and I'm making all this impact. People see this impact that I'm making. I'm getting all these like amazing messages, but the results aren't necessarily falling behind. I want everybody to, like, stories are data with soul. I'm telling the story for a reason. It's being vulnerable and sharing a story for a reason, because it's, if you don't know what you're asking for, you can go out and make all the impact in the world and you're not going to get the results. If people aren't very clear on what it is that you're doing, they can have a lot of energy when you're around. They can be excited that they were on your podcast. They can get excited about the clips that you're putting out for them. But if you're not being very specific about what it is that you're doing, nobody knows how to completely help you. And so I'm going out and I'm making all this impact. However, the results aren't coming. And so, man, I had to really, really boil down and get self-aware. I had to invest in coaching, right? I had to get a coach for myself, and go through a program that to really make me go deep. And so I got into a program with the Growing a Brilliant Business program. And got a grant from the Howell Livingston Business Hub, an extension of the Howell Chamber. Heard about this from my friend Kevin Sabaski, who's a program coordinator in his program, Growing a Brilliant Business, is part of that program. And he brought me in because we had been working together, and I've been doing some one-on-one stuff with him, and it was helping me really start to understand, but I was still like, it took a really long time to really to get the clarity. And what's fun about this, and why it's been why I was so excited, I guess, to take this opportunity to talk about it, is every day it's getting clearer and clearer. And I want everybody to know there's a light at the end of this tunnel, because every day it gets clearer and clearer. And the clearer I get, the more openings and the more things that are opening up to me. And so, everybody that's listened, have been a loyal listener, you've probably heard me ask almost every single guest, have you read the book The Alchemist? And book The Alchemist is by Paulo Coelho. What better name does it get than that? But amazing book. I strongly recommend, if you're an entrepreneur, to go out and read this book, because you'll really resonate with the journey. And so I'm a firm believer that there's lessons to be learned. And, as you're on your journey, as you're searching for your personal legend, what is my purpose? What kind of impact am I intended to make here? And I've said over and over, hell is meeting the person that you're supposed to be. And as I'm sitting there in that gap and I'm not living up to the person that I'm supposed to be, I'm like, I know I'm supposed to impact way more people than this. But I'm holding myself back over here. What is it that I'm doing? Let's get crystal clear, right? And so I'm sitting in this spot and I'm not fully learning my lesson. And because of that, I'm experiencing pain. And so there's a lesson here that, we have to get through this. We have to learn our lesson before we can move on. And once we learn that lesson and we start to get clear, all of a sudden the universe, God, it starts opening doors and giving you what you need in order to find your journey. Now, it's not linear. I might get stuck again. If you're an entrepreneur listening to this, you might be able to really resonate. You might get stuck again. But as you practice becoming self-aware, where can you, like, as soon as you realize you're stuck, observe and ask yourself, what's the lesson here? What am I supposed to learn, right? And so I've been on this journey to really understand, what is my superpower. I felt like I could describe it. There's these things that I do, and in my coaching program a few weeks ago, my coach Kevin was in the group. He was making a point to somebody else, and he had made this point of saying that, hey, what's that thing that you do, that you do with people that it's just, you do it because it's easy. You just like kind of throw it in. You don't even think anything of it. And they're always like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever. And that really struck a chord with me as I've been, really fine tuning, understanding that when I say stories are data with soul, I really am starting to realize that stories are really a huge piece of my platform, and understanding, and even from that intuitive standpoint, thinking about like how I can kind of see people's whole picture, like a sparkle, for example. She literally called me up a couple weeks ago, and she was at this convention, and she starts telling me like that a poster of her was up on the wall, and all these people thought that she was speaking there at this event. And she has built herself up into such a superstar in her industry that the people were going crazy. They were all excited, thinking the Sparkle was going to be speaking. And so as she entered the conference room unexpecting, she had a herd of people that were super excited to see her. And, it's just, she is a superstar within her industry. She is, has branded herself as again, and she is making such a difference and such an impact. And that's why she's such a superstar in what she's doing. But she calls me up and she's like sharing this with me. And there's been so many incredible things that's happened to her, but this one really made me emotional and brought tears to my eyes, because when I started talking to her from the very beginning, one of my first conversations with her, the first time she was on my podcast, for example, I saw this for her. I saw her going into these events in giving a keynote, or, people like following her. I saw her being, I used to call it like, you're going to be the Oprah of your industry. You're going to be like Oprah Winfrey. Everybody's going to hear of you. And so it is really understanding how those people's stories, and seeing it as like strategy, sitting with them in their emotions, understanding who they are as people. And like, as you start to recognize that, again, creating like this pattern. So I'd sit and I'd like, Sparkle is a great example of like, what was I doing throughout this process? I called it one-on-one coaching. But we'd meet for our hour in one-on-one. And then afterwards I'd say, hey, I've got this transcript of this conversation. Let me go create some content for you. And I'm going to cut some clips out of here, because you said some really powerful things out of here. And then I'm going to create a transcript for you. And then you go put that out there, and I'll share it with your marketing team. And, all of a sudden she's posting this stuff. And she has all this content that she's been putting out for the last 4 years that has helped her dominate, right? I've helped her get booked on podcasts, for example, or like connected her with people and then she went out and started doing it herself, where she's been on, I don't know, like over 250 podcasts and TV shows over the last few years. And so she's got all this content out there and she's been sharing this story. And so that's really, it's helped her dominate. And so it's just sitting and thinking about those things, sitting in that superpower and really understanding as I can sit down with people in their story and get them to be very vulnerable, get them to be authentically themselves, sitting in, just last night, I got a text from my brother and he had listened to the episode 200 with my mom. And, he was like, wow, I was super impressed at, just your skill and the way you make people feel so comfortable. My mom did not feel comfortable coming in the studio. I remember when I gifted it to her, she didn't see it necessarily as a gift. But then afterwards, she looked and said, wow, I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And then she started getting attention from it, and people started reaching out to her. And the doctor that she works for, and his wife both reached out to her, and so they listened, and they were so super impressed. And so she started getting all this amazing attention, and all of a sudden, she's flipped the narrative of how she sees herself. That's my favorite thing about Coffee and Grit is getting into people's stories and like them sharing, like I look at myself as kind of like that artist and that Picasso, and like, let's paint this story of like, let's everybody see who you are. Like, let's create this beauty. What makes you different? What stands out? Again, how are you making that difference? And why should people care? As you get down and you tell that story, like guests on this show that are so nervous and they leave after, an hour and 45 minutes of conversation, like thinking it was only 30 minutes that they were sitting in the stool. And then afterwards, they always say, wow, that was incredible. And like, so super impressed about listening to themselves. Again, we look at stories and the stories that we tell ourselves, and it's so important. The story that I told myself for a really long time was that I wouldn't be able to survive in business if I didn't have this sales and this fractional, this consulting piece. What I really started fine tuning in and understanding what I'm doing with people's stories is way deeper than the podcast. It's way deeper than than what I was looking at. And so, like as I'm sitting down with clients now, I've formulated and put together this whole process and package of helping them understand it again. What is their superpower? What is it that they're doing that is making the biggest difference, right? How can they then go out there and have their mission carry them? For example, at boot camp today, shout out to Christy Risner. She's part of a company called Regal Payment Systems. And I've met so many different type of payment people. I've been hired to train some salespeople from a payment processing company. I've had friends that have went and worked for payment processing companies. And there's so many of them out there, and it seems really cutthroat. And I haven't really met very many of them this is their passion project. Like this is something that they just get super excited to go out and do, but they've got to go out and they've got to make these cold calls and they've got to build these relationships and connect with bookkeepers and all that kind of thing in order to get clients. And most of them feel like used car salespeople. And as Christy this morning at boot camp, we're going deep and I'm going into a level, and I asked her the question as we're going deep into her vulnerabilities, and I asked her, why do you believe in what you're doing? And she shared a really awesome story with me about both of her parents being small business owners and how she had watched them growing up and how they were nickel and dimed everywhere, and how this really serves into her passion of helping and serving entrepreneurs like her parents, because this is a slimy, cutthroat business. And she just speaks the truth. And she has honesty, and she can resonate with a small business owner because that's the way that she grew up. And you know what? I'm not even doing the story justice. It was really heartfelt and passionate, and you could tell this is exactly how she felt. Now, the stories are data with soul. That is the magic, and that is her passion. That is, to me, that is the permission to go out there and move past the no soliciting sign and walk straight into a business and say, this is who I am. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And, and ask some really good questions to understand are we a fit or not? And so now if we can switch this narrative from I'm just a salesperson that's out there in a slimy business and everybody sees me as this payment processing. No, I'm on a mission to be different than the norm, right? I have another client that I just started with, and she is amazing. She has a company, she does home health. And she is, when I first time meeting with her and getting her into her passion, she shares with me that she is on a mission to change the way home health care is done. She was like, I have worked in the nursing homes, I've been a part of home health, and I see that people just line up and they think that they're just babysitting people, or they don't treat people with respect and dignity. They don't treat them like they're a second part of the family. And she was like, when I go into a home, she was like, I am 100% committed to these people. In fact, this is so awesome. If you've heard any of these episodes, I've shared this story several times. I've had a friend, Tracey, that a couple years ago, I was on a podcast with her at her office, and she was able to leave the house because she had hired this lady that came and took care of her mom who had dementia. And so, she wasn't able to leave. Her and her dad both were taking care of her mom because her mom would get out of the house and, would get lost and that kind of thing. And so they had that worry, and they ended up hiring this lady that came and took care of her mom. And she said, for the first few weeks, we didn't leave the house because, my mom has dementia and she forgets who we are sometimes. And so we didn't want her to all of a sudden be with this new strange lady and panic. And so we kind of weaned it off. And so I asked her, well, what makes today different? Like, how did you know, okay, today is the day, today's the day we're going to make that change. And she said, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She said, this lady comes in and she's like, she is 5,000% committed to my mom. She listens to her stories. She listens to her jokes. She asks her questions. She reads the Bible to her. She is there only for my mom. She's not checking her phone. She's not thinking about anything else. She's there to be with my mom. And she was like, when she shows up, my mom doesn't know who she is, but she cries tears of joy. She's so excited to see her. She's worked her way into her long-term memory, just in the sense of feeling almost like she's at home when this lady shows up. And I've had the pleasure a few weeks ago of actually meeting this lady. I meet her and she starts telling me these stories of how she takes care of people. And I'm like, oh my God, you have to be the same person. And she was. But she's sitting and she's telling me that she wants to change the face. She wants to change the way that the home health is done and how we see elderly people all together. And then she shows me and she starts telling me how it's so hard to hire. She's getting all these jobs but people only want her to come in because she does such a great job. And so she shows me, she's telling me that it's so hard to find good people, and that, it's hard to find people like her. And so she shows me her job description, and it's a good job description. I've seen so many job descriptions that are not good, but she had a pretty good job description. However, it didn't look different than anybody else's. She had just told me, like I said, that she wanted to change the way that home health was done. And so we created a really purpose-driven job description, a really mission-driven, describing who she is and that she wants to change the face, and that this is just really a story that aligns with what she wants to attract. And we put that up on her Indeed, and then we put it up on her Facebook, or she put it up on her Facebook, and within 5 minutes of putting up that description, she had the perfect fit candidate sending a message, and she actually knows this person, and just a perfect fit, and it's really awesome. Just again, when you speak the language of and you tell the story, and it can really spark somebody's eyes. That again, this lady that responded when I met with her and I had a conversation, she had said that she'd been praying for an opportunity to work with my client and her company, but she just she was nervous for a few reasons to approach her about it, and then she saw that Facebook post with that really purpose-driven message, and she said this is her sign from God that that she needs to reach out. And so, what is that story? What is your superpower? What makes you different? And where we always get stuck is we get stuck on that surface level. We tell a really surface story, and I'm gonna call Denise out we've been partnered up on the objection handling boot camp, and she's been struggling creating content. And I was telling her, it's really easy. I'm like, I can sit with you for, an hour, and we can record our conversation, and I can help you come up with like a strategy on how to share your story. And we sat for an hour, and Denise, you'll appreciate this. I had to constantly tell her to stop being an infomercial. Stop being at the surface level. Let's get deeper. Let's get deeper. There's a reason why we do what we do. And so you may not see it. A lot of visionaries, what is it that you're doing that, it just comes so easy for you? And what could you do if you understood it at a stronger level, right? If you understood exactly what you were doing, how could you develop that even more? A lot of times we beat ourselves up for the things that we're not. We try to improve on all these things that we're not good at, or that we don't even enjoy doing, but we feel like we have to do. And a lot of times when we're entrepreneurs, we do have to do a lot of stuff. But I can guarantee you, if you can find that superpower and define that thing that you're doing, and you can focus more on that, you will be able to afford to hire out people to go do the things that you're not excited to do. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that firsthand. Again, I had this limiting belief around I have to stay over here in fractional sales. What I'm seeing is an opportunity to take what I was doing from a fractional sales standpoint and work with those difference-making entrepreneurs that are either at the startup phase of their business, or they're in the middle ground of their business. And there's opportunities out there. I just had to shut my mind down. I had created this narrative, and you can't, no matter, I haven't seen it ever. And so, with myself, with anybody I've ever worked with, no matter if you're rich, poor, black, white, male, female, no matter what, you cannot outthink your belief system. If you, whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you're going to prove yourself right. Our minds are excellent servants, terrible masters. If we ask our mind a question, for example, why am I so fat? Your mind will come up because you eat all those cookies, because you have no discipline, because you don't get up and work out. It will start answering the questions for you, right? And so, how can you reprogram and create a different story? How can you shape your story? And so, a lot of people, again, when they struggle, I love sitting down. In my mom, for example, I shared she was not excited to sit down here and share her story. She didn't think that she had anything of value to say. But I've gotten so many text messages from people that are like talking about how my mom's an amazing person, how my mom's a bastion of strength, how my mom provides hope to people, how tell your mom she's an amazing lady. Like, right, all these amazing messages that I constantly send her, and it's awesome. I usually get them in the morning, and I shoot them to her shoot her a message in the morning, because she had shared in this episode how, she still has a hard time believing that people like her. How many of us are walking around feeling that? I think far too many of us are walking around feeling like, we're not liked, or do people having a hard time believing that that we're different, or that we're special, or we're humble around what our superpowers are, and so we don't go down and really dig deep to really see it and understand it. And so, man, to that lights me up. And so, to answer Cam's question, when I get people like that I can light them up and really help them, both internally and externally, create their narrative. It's so important. The absolute biggest sale that you will ever do is to yourself. I can teach anybody how to sell as long as you believe it. I can teach anybody how to sell and it's not painful. I can teach anybody how to sell and it will be fun. But if you don't believe it, if you don't believe it will work, then I can't teach you, and I don't even want to try. If it's a product that if you never think that you'll ever believe in it, right? However, like when I asked Christy, why do you believe in this? I didn't know what kind of answer she was going to give me. She could have said, I don't love doing this. And so I loved it when she really got into her passion, and she started sharing this story of why she did it. She'd been in my boot camp for like 7 sessions, and she had never shared this story before. Let's get pulled by our mission. I shared a story with the boot campers last week. that when I started my business and, I talked about, again, doing these fractional sales, but I was going out and I was meeting up with other coaches and consultants and I was having coffee with them, or I was picking their brain because I wanted to learn from them. What are they doing? And I quickly, I discovered two things. The first thing I discovered was it's really easy to get yourself in imposter syndrome. As I would sit and I would meet with these people, I realized I started stacking myself up against them in the sense that I thought they were probably better coaches or consultants than me. The way they talked and delivered, and they had these deliverables and things, I was just kind of winging it a lot of times. And so I had a lot of imposter syndrome. However, what I started to realize is that almost every single one was struggling selling themselves. Almost every single one of them were heart-centered and they were giving their services away for free. They weren't making what they were worth. They were charging way less than they were worth. And a lot of them, like I'd say 75% of my conversations I was having with these incredible difference-making people, if they didn't start making money, they were going to have to go out and find a job, or they were going to, they were really being faced with the challenge that I need to get out of my own way. And I didn't invite these people to have conversation, to sell them anything or talk about a service. I wasn't even prepared to do one-on-one coaching or anything like that because I was thinking I had, these consulting clients. And however, when the first time I had one of these conversations and I thought of somebody, a few weeks later, I messaged her and she had said that she went back to a job and that she, her dream was actually a nightmare, and that, she should have never started a business because now she's in the hole. But now she's doing something that is passionless. She is working a job that she is, it's probably payment processing. No offense against payment processing, but there's so many jobs out there that you take because it's a job and it'll pay the bills. But how long will you actually be at that job before you're at a new job? I see so many entrepreneurs and so many people that are meant to make a difference and meant to make a purpose in life, but then they go out and they fail, they don't make money, and they go through a year like I went through last year, or the year I went through my first year in business, right, trying to figure out and create a business, and they fold, they cave in, right? And then, so not only did they think that purpose, that passion, that thing they were supposed to do, it failed, but now they're working a soulless job, and they feel that. They feel every bit of that. And so I have seen so many people, like I said, that all of a sudden, every 3 months they're switching jobs because it's in their mind now. And so the first time that happened, I'm like, who am I to get in my head and not tell them that I can help them, right? And figure out a way to make it work. And so I always looked at, okay, let me start off with these low prices to work with these entrepreneurs because they don't have money to really pay for it, and I'll like do this thing here, and I'd offer them these deals. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't dirt cheap. I was offering it, but it wasn't. The thing with coaching clients a lot of times is it would be like a 3-month gig. And so I'm constantly looking for new money. I had this mindset of like, it's got to be a constant struggle, right? Again, a game changer. When you build up something and you're doing something, when you start sharing it, you build up that goodwill, you're going out and you're making impact with a lot of people. When you get really clear on what it is that you're doing, all of a sudden the doors start opening. And so that's what's really cool on that end. So big message out of this is one, really start becoming self-aware. What lights you up? What gives you energy? Who are the people that light you up? Again, I look at describing those people that are making that change. If I can empower them to grow their business, to see their business come to fruition, their dreams to come true, man, think of that difference in that energy from that person that had to go back and get a job and feel like their dream was a nightmare, to that person fulfilling their dreams, that sparkle that's out there and walking into a convention, and all of a sudden, people are like, she's got a herd of people coming at her wanting to work with her. She's in the bathroom calling me and asking me if she should set one-on-ones with people. I'm like, how many people are coming up to you? And she's like, I've had at least 100. I'm like, do you have time to do 100 one-on-ones? No. So we're in the bathroom creating a group coaching program, right? And so, it's one of those things like that difference in that energy, man, that lights me up. And when we get people that those are the people that I want to operate in. I think back over the history of time, the people that I've had the most impact with, and some great names, and people that I've shared about in the podcast over time, the Joshes and the Hannahs back when I was at the Verizon franchise. The Sparkles and the Desi Mainers that are out there that just, they're beasts. They're absolute difference makers, and there just needs to be a little bit of shifts in the way that you see yourself, right? Speaking of Desi Mainers, super excited. Desi's going to be up on the podcast next month. I got some really, really awesome guests lined up man, super excited to have two guests coming up. A little side detail. Two guests coming up of people that I've had long-term relationships with. One, Becca Buttermore. I had the opportunity to coach Becca a couple of years ago now. We have never met in person, but she is bringing her friend Robbie Parker. I'm going to butcher that name. I apologize, but he is a dad of he lost his daughter in the Sandy Hook shooting, back several years ago. Just recently wrote a book. He's going to be coming in from Utah. So super excited that he's going to be flying out here from Utah. Becca's coming from Pennsylvania. And then the very following week, we'll be in the recording studio on March 17th. So it'll come out sometime in April. I will have my friend Barbara Ellison, who I did a podcast with Barbara called Everyday Riches. I've shared Barbara's story several times. She's been on an episode of Coffee and Grit, on a virtual episode, but we've never met in person. And I'm super excited, kind of along the same path of what we're talking about now, is who is your true self? Barbara had a story of, she was told her whole life as a female. She's in her 70s now. And so she grew up in a time where her parents told her that she needed to dim herself down. She needed to not wear loud makeup. She needed to, quiet her personality. She was too big of a personality and blah, 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 blah. And so she fit in and became what other people wanted her to become. And that's my number one, guys. That's my number one message right here, is don't fit into the box and be what everybody else wants you to become. Unleash that fucking beast, right? Uncage that beast. You've got a beast inside. You've got a story. You've got an amazing story that if you share it, people will want not only to follow you, but they'll want, they'll want to listen to you, and they want what you have to offer them, right? It's the way to differentiate ourselves. We're walking around, we're in industries like payment processing and real estate, and like, how do you create and tell a story that is different? We had a client come through boot camp that is in real estate, and like, man, when you're in real estate, how do you share, like, this is how I'm different? Right? So she comes through boot camp, and again, everything's ingrained in stories. And again, stories are data of the soul. I tell these stories so you can take them, process them, and how can you dive deep? How can you go beyond your surface level? What is it that you're doing with your clients? What is it you're doing with your friends? What's that thing that you do that lights you up, that you do so easy, right? I would get off the phone after I connected with somebody, and they would tell me an amazing story, and I always looked at myself. I always laughed and made a joke that I'm like Jay-Z. If you throw me a beat, I'm gonna write a hook for it, right? I'm gonna so they throw me a beat with their story, and I'll just jam it down and put a hook over it and create a post for them that was like authentic. And every single time I'd send it out to them and they'd post it, it would drive crazy traffic, and they would get the type of people responding that they wanted to talk to, right? And so this thing that I'm doing that's like so simple and so easy, what is that thing that you're doing? And how can you amplify that now? How can I amplify not only these podcast conversations, but okay, now this is what I'm doing. Let's sit down and have a session. You're a visionary. You want to make a big impact and difference in the world, but you're having a really hard time putting this down and documenting it. You're having a really hard time explaining it. You're really having a hard time narrow down and understand who's my target market. Who are the clients that I want to serve? Like, who do I help, right? And how do I reach them? How do I talk to them? What are their biggest challenges? Most importantly, like, if those are your things, what is the narrative that I'm sharing? Like, what is the narrative that I'm thinking in my head? And what is my actual true narrative? Let's get those aligned, right? Because they say the Navy SEALs have a saying that's like, you don't rise to the occasion, but you fall to your level of preparedness. And this is your level of preparedness. If you are out there, and I'm like Christy, for example, in the payment processing world, and I see myself as somebody that is a difference maker, that I see myself as a second generation entrepreneur, that I've seen the way businesses are nickel and dimed, and I'm out here and I'm on a mission to help others just like my parents, and I see you just like my parents. That's really the way that I see my clients and my prospects, is just like my parents, and I'm on a mission to serve them. I am going to light the world on fire. I'm not going to stop at the no soliciting sign. And even when the lady's rude to me, I'm going to share why I'm in there and why it's beneficial for them to talk to me, because I'm on a mission. I see myself differently. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you're having a hard time, or you're a visionary and you're having a really hard time, like having that confidence and really seeing yourself, and you're not getting past that surface, that is where reach out to me. Like, let's shoot me a message, and let's schedule a time, because it's really just sitting down again, going through a story session and really fleshing out from just 60 to 90 minutes of conversation. We can have a really cool format, picture, and clarity of who your people are. And like I said, this is exciting because this is what I've been doing this whole entire time. Like, I just go and do. And what's really exciting now is like forming my services. This is the first time I've been kind of slugging my company out and doing it all by myself. And now I'm seeing like, okay, there's some areas where I can really grow this thing, because I really see opportunities to make impact with difference makers. Again, there's so many cookie cutter things out there. It's like, go do this, go be that. Just be yourself, right? Be yourself, be like Rudolph, and take off that freaking black nose and let that bitch shine, right? Let it shine, because that's the beast that you are inside, and the world needs to know it. How do you get past that? Oh, what are they going to think of me? Right. That's where the coaching comes in. That's again, I'm sharing this because this is my own discovery of like, this is the impact that I'm making in the world. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And once I do more of this stuff, once I, uncage more sparkles and again, once I got crystal clear on this and said, this is the direction I'm going, and this is my program, all of a sudden it's like, boom, 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 boom. My calendar's full. They're like, people are reaching out to me that I've had in my network, or they've been on the podcast, that are now have like mission driven things that are falling in my purpose. It's like the universe is conspired because I now have the clarity. It goes back to the science. It isn't just, the science of the reticular activation system. So we can only, I said earlier, our minds are excellent servants, terrible masters. We can only gather so much information at one time. However, there's an infinite amount of possibilities, an infinite amount of things happening right now all around us. And so what we typically do is we delete, we distort, and we generalize information. And so whatever that the reticular activation system, that is like our internal algorithm. You look at, if you're on TikTok, for example, what you're looking at is what you receive, right? If I go onto your TikTok feed, I'm going to see what you're looking at all day long, because those video posts are catered to you. That's what the reticular activation system is inside your brain, like right about here at the base of your spinal cord in your brain. It's like that's your filter. It's telling you what's important. And so that's why narrative and story is so important. How do you see yourself? How do you see yourself in the way that you're showing up in the world? And what's so awesome is we can change the way that we see ourselves by changing our story and narrative, and like going beyond that surface. It's not just all of a sudden writing a story and saying, this is who I am. You gotta open the doors and go authentic, right? This is like deep. Who are you really? Why are you really doing what you're doing? Right? why it's so easy for me. And I always think of this story when I was a sales director at the Wireless Zone, and my boss would send me to the annual reviews quarterly reviews every quarter. As a agent of Verizon, we had to meet with the corporate bigwigs at Verizon, the corporate leadership team at Verizon, and we'd have to give them our business plan. And the owner of our company, Debbie, told me she was the only owner that didn't go in and give this presentation. Every other agent of Verizon, the owner of the company, would go in and give the quarterly report. And I would go in there. Sometimes she'd come with me. Most of the time, I'd go by myself. And I would go in there and give the report. And she said, because you're living the story. You're living it. You're doing it. If I go in there, I've got to make it up. I've got to get the report from you, and it's going to come secondhand. When you tell it, you're so passionate about it because you're actually living it and doing it. And she said to me something that I thought was so true. She's like, everybody else is just making up their story. She was like, everybody else is just telling the leadership team what they hope to do. She was like, you're living it. You're doing it. And so that really stuck out. What are you living and doing, and how can you reframe that story to uncage your beast and to make the impact that you really were put here on this earth to make? I hope everybody got something out of this episode, and tune in next week.